So, Michael, you've done a lot here to demystify K, to show that it's not a cult. You don't need to belong to a race of semi-.
We do pray to Arthur every Thursday. So.
Welcome to another episode of ArrayCast. Today we have a special guest who we will get to introducing in a couple minutes. But before we do that, we're going to go around and do brief introductions from our panelists, and then we'll have a few announcements and one follow-up. So we'll go to Stephen, then to Bob, then to Marshall, and then to Adam.
I'm Stephen Taylor. I'm an APL and Q programmer.
I'm Bob Therriault. I am a J enthusiast.
I'm Michal Wallace. I'm a former J programmer, dialogue developer, now BQN developer.
I'm Adám, Brudzewsky, full-time APL programmer and teacher.
And my name is Connor. I'm professionally a research scientist, and I'll just start saying that I'm a polyglot from now on, that I know multiple languages. So I think we have one follow-up that we will throw it to Marshall for, and then after that, we've got a couple announcements, one from Stephen and then a couple from Adam. So let's start with the follow-up from Marshall.
So last episode we talked about, what puts something in the APL family, the Iversonian family of languages. And one thing I think it was Adam brought up after the episode that we didn't think of during the episode was that all these Iversonian languages have no precedence between what in APL are functions, or in what in like C or another language would be operators. So if you have like plus, minus, times, divide, all of those are on the same level. They apply. There's no, like, you don't have to know that multiplication happens before addition. So that would put all the classics, APL, J, K, BQN, actually Neil as well, in the Iversonian or closer to the Iversonian category. And it would throw out a lot of other families like Futhark, like Wolfram language. So that's an interesting criterion that we didn't bring up.
Yeah, maybe we should have a whole episode at some point on, maybe we can tie that in, because at some point we have slotted a discussion about overloading, and I feel like that might go sort of hand in hand, because there's other languages, interestingly, Smalltalk doesn't have. Actually, I think they do to a certain extent, but like the same way that when you have plus times, like a mathematical expression, it just evaluates left to right, whereas APL is right to left. But yeah, we will stay tuned, listeners, and we may talk about this in the future. So let's go to Stephen for our announcements now.
Since the last episode, we've held a couple of Q vector dojos. In these dojos, we're concentrating on the shift from working in loops and scalar languages kind of teach you to think in, to moving to vector solutions, getting fluent with the techniques and being able to see the vector solutions rather than what Joel beautifully described on this podcast as the one potato, two potato approach.
That was awesome.
For the time being, we're keeping the dojos small. So they're like tutorial groups. There's me and no more than 3 other people. We work for an hour and a hour or so on problems that suit all of us. It's highly informal. It's very interactive. Nobody gets left out. Everybody gets to participate on the solution, and it's being a lot of fun. The next one will be in the next week or so. It will suit the India time zone. As we had a lot of interest from people in India, and and we need to pick a time zone that suits them. If you're not already plugged into this, the conversation is in the Iverson College workspace on Slack. If you'd like to get in, write to me, sjt@5jt.com.
Awesome. And I think, links will be in the show notes.
Yeah.
And I think, Adam, you've got a couple more announcements.
Yeah, so Richard Park and I have released a new episode of our APL Notation as a Tool of Thought podcast, this time on notational awkwardnesses. That should be fun.
I have to interrupt. And I said I would do this before. Is it really a podcast yet? Because it does not exist in the podcastopia. And I have checked, I wouldn't say every day, but I've checked a few times because I know it's on YouTube, and there is an MP3 file on a website or like a playable thing, but it is for those that are listening and being like, I haven't found it on my app. I think that's because it's not on any of the apps yet. Is this correct?
Yeah, I have this weird thing about not wanting to pay for external services or indeed use any libraries or anything. So I'm trying to implement the whole RSS feed from scratch myself.
That explains it. That explains it.
So until I figure out how to do this right, then it's not there. But I think I have some leads.
What makes an internet broadcast a podcast? We must have an episode on this.
Oh no, Meta. If somebody out there wants to help me, the repository, you can link to it. You can see what it looks like, and I'll be happy with some help to get it right.
When he gets it right, we'll all be living in Adam's world.
Yeah.
Okay, then there was recently this Dialog user meeting, and little by little, Dialog is releasing these videos of people's presentations, and so there's a whole set again that was released on both some technical stuff and some user experience, people doing actual things with APL. So you can go and check that out.
Yeah,
and especially I'd like to point out there's something that hasn't happened for many years, is that we put out a special edition of the interpreter called the Conference Edition, and it's a special build of the interpreter where lots of experimental features are there. It might not be stable. It can give firm errors and stuff when you use it, but there's some really cool stuff that some of which might go into version 19, and it's available after the user meeting. Anybody can go and download it and play with it and really like feedback, both positive and negative feedback on that this is crazy or that's awesome, or you could do it like that. Some things have just been done in a certain way because that's the idea John Daintree got, and might want to do it differently.
Two short questions. Are there sort primitives, and is there the BQN before, aka the Sigma combinator? Any of those?
No, it doesn't have any new primitives. It's just the system basically that's different. However, it hasn't been released yet, but I did a presentation on 3 new primitives that we're thinking of adding, and it has been met with applause both internally and at the user meeting with the audience there. So it's pretty certain that we're getting those. One of which is indeed that backwards compose, or you want to call it, behind.
One out of 2. Yeah. So stay tuned.
It's not in the Conference Edition build, but
it's coming soon.
Yeah, should be getting it. And then in regards to sort, I'm not even proposing that we add sort primitives, but rather adding a select or from function, which makes together with the behind or before combinator, then sorting becomes really simple. It's 3 characters and it's not a train, so you don't need to parenthesize it. And it works both for sort and sort by. So that should be fine. You can already do this in BQN, of course.
All right. Well, once it's in the interpreter, we'll talk about it on a future episode. Is that all the announcements we have?
I think so.
Yeah. I just realized while Stephen was speaking that I have one announcement, and then I realized there's another thing I can announce. So the thing that I thought of while Stephen was speaking was that there is actually another, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, Q announcement, in that they changed their free license policy. So it used to be, I think, that the license, if you downloaded the experimental license or free license, it was good for a month, but now it's good for a year, which is great because now you don't have to. And actually, does it expire after a year, or maybe it doesn't expire at all? I can't remember the details, but you can download it and it's free for a lot longer, and you don't need to update things if you were running into that problem. And my last announcement is that there is a video. What was it called? It's called Stop Writing Dead Programs, from the StrangeLoop 2022 conference, which is a conference that covers a variety of programming languages. I think Clojure and Lisps are very popular there, but usually they have some esoteric topics. And this talk, which was just given a couple months ago, is now the 5th most viewed talk on that YouTube channel with close to 200,000 views, which is massively impressive because like the number 3 most viewed talk was by Joe Armstrong from like 2014. And at the beginning of this talk, the presenter Jack Rusher, basically goes from assembly to C to a couple other languages and boils down to what he thinks is like the highest abstraction, the most beautiful thing, and it's APL. So shall I go watch that code? APL gets a shout out. And it doesn't say much else about APL, but the talk in general is just fantastic. Talks about a plethora of things and how we could be doing a lot better. Anyways, our guest has been patiently waiting because we've had so many introductions and announcements and skipping around. Our guest today, probably you know this by the title of this podcast episode, is Michal Wallace, who goes by, I believe, on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, maybe a couple other platforms, as Tangentstorm. And super excited to talk to Michal today because he works at 1010 Data currently, but has had a long and storied career. And from looking at his LinkedIn profile, has coded in a plethora of languages, Python, Java. I could go on. And so it's going to be interesting to hear his story from going through all these different languages and ending up at, I believe it's K that they use at 1010 Data, and then J, which is what you typically promote. And I've seen some live streams where you've been building up, editors and lots of cool things. And I saw what was it? A YouTube video that was really, really great in showing the power and expressivity of J that was sort of building up a little deck of cards sort of program, which we'll link that in the show notes. It's a great example, similar to sort of some of Bob's videos of highlighting what you can do with J. Anyways, I'll stop there, throw it over to Michal, and he can tell us the story, go back as far as you want to, when you were born, when you started programming, and bring us to how you got to, working at 1010 Data and sort of living in this array language world.
Wow. Well, thanks for having me, guys. So I've been programming for ages, as far back as I can remember. I think first or second grade, some lady came to our school and rolled in like the one computer in the city, for the school district to our class and showed us, hey, this is a thing called a computer, and it has this thing called BASIC on it, and you can tell it what to do with this language called BASIC. And I thought that was cool. I was hooked on it. I don't think I even touched the thing. I was just, I just thought it was neat. And so I for years, anytime I happened to go in a library or book fair and there was something about programming, I would take that book or check it out, or, just try and read it the same way you might read about, going to outer space or dinosaurs or something. I just thought it was a cool thing. So probably by the time I was I think even in middle school, I think I took like one little course in like a college for kids kind of thing during the summer, where we got to spend a couple of weeks at the local community college. And I have a floppy disk from it, but I don't know. I have no idea what happened in that class or what they taught me, but I must have been there. And I think by the time I was in middle school, like I knew, like I had the ideas in my head about like, what programming was and kind of like general. And then I think I was finally eighth grade or so. I was a teacher's assistant, and my reading teacher had 4 Tandy 1000s in the back of her class, and no idea. She probably never touched them or had any idea what to do with them. And she let me use it. So that's what I did for half a school year, was just sit in the room for one period a day. And I had one little floppy disk and a copy of the GW basic manual, no internet, nothing like that, just the keyboard and a floppy disk in the manual. And I started making little screensavers and tried to make what was some primitive attempt at a game or something like that, and learned how to use this thing. And eventually my parents got me a computer, so I learned a lot of GW basic. And you could sit there, you could turn on your computer, fire up, type in GW basic at the DOS prompt, and you would get didn't have an editor or anything. You just typed, if you wanted to edit line 10 of your program, you typed the number 10 space, print hello world, enter. You always, because you couldn't delete lines, you always started with 10, right? Because you might want to put a line in between. I moved on to Turbo Pascal pretty quickly. I thought that was neat. That was my go-to language for many years. Just fooling around, teaching myself. So I feel like that's how I learned how to program, not professionally or anything. I did eventually get a job as in fact, by the time I graduated from high school, I had no plans to be a computer programmer. I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, like I said, I compared it to dinosaurs earlier. Like I really thought that programming was something that like maybe 2 or 3 guys at NASA did or something. Like I didn't realize how much a demand there was for this skill. And so I thought I was going to be some kind of writer. Eventually found out that this paid better, but I did take a job as a QA guy. It was my dad's company. Like they hired the children of the people that worked there every summer, and so I had an internship there, and they they put me on this QA team they were forming. They had hired an outside consulting company to build some software for them, and they were all embedded there. So they hired, or they brought in one of their guys to be the QA czar, and so I started in QA, and we did like a lot of like it was called Visual Test, which is like a dialect of Visual Basic. We just write tests about this about this program. Like, it was an insurance and they do family planning for military families, and so I made up this little family, and they were Fred and Wanda Tempe. I used them for like ever since then. I've used them as my test people for years and years now. But they have a little family, and they bought all this insurance, and you put them through the ringer, and that was what I did all summer.
Put them through the ringer.
put the software through the ringer.
Poor Fred and Wanda. Just for years they've been getting.
They have a website. If you go to TempeTantrum.com, you can see Fred Tempe, Fred and Wanda. That was the first time I had like a professional programmer critiquing my work and telling me hey, you could do this better. And some guy, but again, I still thought I was going to be like a novelist. So after high school, I took some time off and tried to write a book. I wrote a very short book. It was an okay first attempt for a kid, and I tried to write another one, and it just basically I spent the year after high school just kind of being depressed because all my friends were off at school, and I was all by my home trying to write this book. And somebody, a friend of mine I met online, invited me and said, hey, maybe you should do some teaching. And so I got involved teaching little kids to read, or first just helping after school with homework and that kind of thing, and eventually started working professionally as through AmeriCorps, a thing Bill Clinton set up, kind of like a domestic version of the Peace Corps, that they give you money for college and a little stipend every month. And so that was my career path for a while. Then was to teach children. I wasn't at any time really trying to be a computer programmer. In college I was an art and performance major, again thinking I'd do some kind of writing stuff. I had a minor in called cognitive science, so it was like half. It was their closest thing to, it was University of Texas at Dallas, the closest thing they had to AI degrees. So they had psychology and computer science. And so I took a C++ class and assembly class, and I didn't really find my calling. And eventually I wound up dropping out and moved across country for a girl, and just was looking for something to do. I wound up working just in a plastic surgery center. They were kind of disorganized in some ways. Like they had this software for what do you call it, receivables. Like, so people have come in and they've gotten their surgery, and you're trying to bill their insurance company, but maybe some of it's elective, and so you're billing the person directly. And they had to call like all these people, and it turned out in the software they were using, there were like 6 screens that they had to go to look at, to just gather the information to call one person. And so I said, that's kind of dumb, and let me take a look. And I dug in, and they were actually this software was just an access database under the hood. And so I wrote them a little report that you could print out, and it would have everything they needed for each person and all the people they needed to call in one little report. And I gave it to them, and they looked at it and said, oh, okay, whatever, thanks. And then the next day they're like, you're my hero, So eventually I called the company that made that software, and like they were a local company in Atlanta. I said, hey, I'm fixing your software and come hire me. And so they did. And they hired me, and I went to work for that company for a while. And I kind of split it between teaching people how to use their software. Sometimes I would sit down and with at somebody's medical practice, and I'd sit down with the lady they'd hired outside and said, this is a mouse. Let's play some solitaire so you can learn how to use this mouse. And then we flew all around the country doing that kind of stuff, teaching just all kinds of different people. Eventually I left that and started working at a consulting company, and we did more Microsoft Access stuff. And then all of a sudden this thing called the web started popping up, and we kind of sat the boss down one day and said, hey, look, we need to stop with this access stuff and start doing, internet. And then we made all kinds of stuff for all kinds of Fortune 500 companies. And eventually I decided I wanted to start my own company. And actually I had been teaching a friend of mine to program, and we decided to start a company. And he said, well, let's make something for a company. And so we made a little shopping cart system in PHP, and that turned into an attempt to build a software company. it was just me and him, and we didn't. We don't know the first thing about actually like running the business. So let's do something simple, and let's just get a server and put it out there and start charging people for web hosting, right? Just to learn the process of like, how do you take a credit card? How do you do this? And so we did that. I did that. Within a few years, that was my source of income. I was running a web hosting company, and he went on to do something else. And we never built a software company, but I made a web hosting company, and I did that for like 10 years. Every once in a while, I take a little side job, but I mostly just, and I say ran a company, it was like me, right? I was a support person that had a couple hundred customers. I built a control panel and a billing system and all this stuff in Python. And I built, at the time there weren't, today you go download Flask and Jinja or templates or something like that, and or Django if you want, but none of that existed. And so I had to roll my own web framework. But in any case, I ran that company for many years. I did a lot. Gave me a lot of time to just learn about other languages. That was, I had a lot of freedom and flexibility. I was tied to my laptop to answer support emails, but I had the time to, work on whatever I wanted in my business, and a lot of time that meant like automating whatever I wanted. So I spent a lot of time just making stuff in Python for that business, and a lot of time like looking at other languages and like trying out Smalltalk and Haskell, and just learning, kind of finishing my education by being self-taught. That's things that I didn't learn in about computer science, like how to write parsers and how to write virtual machines and things like that. Kind of filled in the gaps on my own. And then at some point that most of my clients were bloggers, and when the 2008 financial crisis hit, a lot of people were strapped for cash, and they were like, I don't need to pay $5 a month, $10 a month for a blog anymore. And so I started losing business very rapidly, started focusing more on like client work. But I was spending so much time outside of the company that it just, like, my tech support got even worse and worse and worse. So finally I just had to, stop that, and needed a job. And actually, I was trying to save the company for a while. And so like to cut costs, I moved back in with my parents for a while. But I was living with my brother for a while, and I was like, I can't mooch on my family forever. So I gotta work. And so I decided to go back to work. I worked at a publishing company that made yearbooks. We were doing like Angular and like an actual modern Python backend. I wasn't terribly happy. It was actually an hour-long commute every morning, and they had meetings at 7:00 in the morning. My boss was an early bird, so I was not too thrilled with that situation. And so I started looking for another job. And by this time, I had learned J, and I had spent a lot of time like on the internet, especially when I wasn't working. I spent a lot of time on the internet hanging out in a channel called Learn Programming on an IRC channel. And we had little bots in there. So one day I went to like the Haskell channel, say, hey, can we get the Haskell bot in here? So that you could type Haskell expressions. And we collected a Perl bot we had just like a bunch of, finally I went into this J software channel, and I said, can we get this J bot? And so I said, sure. Or they said, sure. And we had the J bot in our channel. So I learned J kind of like just using it as a calculator for a long time in that channel. And we just had it there. And every once in a while I'd say, oh, you can make this little pattern. And it was nice to have it as like a demonstration tool for, if somebody had a question about an algorithm, you could often like type it into the J prompt, and it would print out, you could very easily generate like a little bitmap of characters on the screen and like show something step by step. And I would show it off. And so that's kind of how I learned J, was just as a kind of a parlor trick for this IRC channel for a little while. And then one day I thought, it had been so long since I had been a beginner. I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and do something that's just really outside my comfort zone. And I said, I'm going to learn this J language. I'm going to learn to like actually make programs in J. And so I read the J for C programmers and the primer and all these things, and I worked through them. And I don't know, I came out of there with a new language. So and I made a video about it. About one thing I thought was cool was the Ulam spiral. So Ulam was a mathematician, and one day he was doodling, and he had this piece of, I guess, graph paper, and he drew the number 1, and he started counting, but he wrote the numbers in a spiral. And then he marked out the primes, and the primes made some little pattern. He was like, oh, that's neat. And so that's called Ulam spiral. So somehow that came up in the channel. I was like, oh, I wonder how I could do this. And it turned out to be like, I found a way that I thought was kind of clever to do it in J in like one line of code. And so I made a video about that one line of code, and that's now like this. That was the start of my channel, and it became ridiculously, or it's certainly the most popular video I've ever uploaded, even today. While I was job searching, I was looking for a J job. There are no such things. I think Eric Iverson, when he was on here, said people don't admit to using J, and they don't even tell their boss they're using J when they use J. So there aren't any of those. But there are a lot of K jobs, and I think I even tweeted it at KX, like, why is everybody in New York? Are there any remote jobs? Anyway, I was looking for a job, and I thought it would be neat to work in an array language, so I had that on my radar. I'd actually like almost applied to 1010, but like something, I don't know, like some link didn't work on the website or whatever, and I just I'll just move on. Yeah, I'm not really looking to move to New York anyway. But our chief scientist posted to the subreddit one day, and he said, not really a job advertisement, and then he said, we're always looking for people who are interested in K. And so I wound up talking to him on Reddit for a little bit, and one thing turned to another, and I wound up coming out here to New York to interview, and I actually met Joel and Stephen after, Joel Kaplan and Stephen after, both of whom have been on this podcast, and they both interviewed me that day, and they didn't kick me out, so they gave me an offer, and I came to New York, and that's where I've been ever since. I think I'm done rambling now. So
I was gonna say that's pretty interesting, because it sounds like, I'm not sure if I'm going to enumerate every single one, but from QW Basic to ASP to Python to PHP, I think there's a few others you mentioned, and then you were just happened to be on an IRC, and maybe, I'm not sure if you're the only outlier that we've interviewed, but many of our guests that we've interviewed were like immediately taken by the language, and they, it was love at first sight for one reason or another, the notation, the brevity, etc. And it sounds like you were exposed to it because someone asked for a JBot and you implemented that, and then you used it for a while, but only ended up sort of, or maybe I'm sort of inferring this, and it might not even be true, that you have a deep passion for the language. It's more you were fascinated with it and you find it cool to make YouTube videos. Maybe you're not, maybe you're dissimilar, and it's a language or a paradigm you use because 1010 data uses it now. But it's interesting that you sort of ended up becoming proficient in it or going and learning it as like a challenge to yourself, not because you were, in love with the digraphs or something to it about the language spoke to you. Like, is there something behind that, or is anything you want to like add to contextualize that sort of difference?
So when I was running the web hosting company, I had a lot of time to just follow my interests. I talked to a lawyer once, like, is it possible to get investments in this company? She said, no, this is a lifestyle business, right? This is not and it was true. Like, this was me. I didn't know what I was doing. Had I been a better business person, I would have weathered the storm and grown the company, right? But no, it was a little boutique thing. And so I had a lot of time to just, maybe part of this is, because I was spending a lot of time just like following my interests rather than working on the business. But I just, we would dabble in lots of different languages. I always, every time I would start a new project, it was like I always had the choice of like, do I try this new language and actually make something in it, or and have to fight through the learning curve and learn yet another way to do the same thing I've learned how to do 100 times before in other languages. Or do I just, stick with Python and actually make it? So usually what it turned out to be was I would just, I'd play with Smalltalk for a couple of days and think, learn what was cool about it. I'd play with Pascal, same thing. And in fact, I have a GitHub repository called Tangentlabs, and there's like a directory of just like, I don't know, maybe 75 different languages. And there's just like little snippets of different things I've done in all those languages. Most of them are trivial, right? They're just like going through tutorials and stuff. But I did a lot of that. And there was also one of the big programming communities that I was involved with at the time was the C2.com wiki. So they were the people that actually, Ward Cunningham's wiki, that they had actually created. He's the guy that created the term wiki and invented the concept of a wiki. It was about whatever people wanted to write about, but like they had attracted quite a few programmers, and especially people from the Smalltalk community. But they also would have pages like, there was a page called J language, and they had little snippets posted, and in a way, like you look at this in awe and like, so it wasn't like I had never heard of the language before, but like I was aware that J was a thing. And there's a paper that I talk about, or I think about a lot, that Paul Graham wrote called the Python Paradox. Basically, he was making the argument that if you use Python, which is this obscure language that nobody uses at the time, then you're going to attract, you're going to think that you won't be able to find anybody that uses this obscure language. But in fact, the people that use it are going to be people who are really interested in languages and really excited about programming. And vice versa, if you find a Python job, then, maybe that's a cool place to work. And so for that reason, I was very, when I see that a company like 1010 Data uses K, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know K at the time. I knew it was something similar in the ballpark of J. And I sent them the video that as part of my like introduction that I had made about the Ulam spiral. They don't expect to hire a K programmer for that same reason. But they're saying, well, you can learn. And so if you have an interest in stuff, you'll learn. And so I think, I know I'm rambling. The actual question was, whether I thought J was just a challenge to myself. I think the answer is that I like different languages, and I like to try and puzzle out what it means to express an idea in a particular language. And if you throw different languages at me, I wouldn't say I'm in love with a particular language, but I do like J. J is definitely one of my favorite languages. And was it instant? No, I thought it was not love at first sight. It was just, this is interesting at first sight.
So if I've got this right, Michael, you didn't know K when you were interviewed by Joel and Stephen for 1010 Data.
Correct. I think I had downloaded Kona, and I downloaded I think I downloaded Kona, and then Adám, the guy that hired me, said, no, you want to download the one from KX. It's a little closer to what we use. So I played with it a little, and I tried to like make like 1 or 2 lines of K, but yeah, I was not a K programmer until, but I knew J, and that was my credentials.
So I think Stephen Taylor's talked about this as a lot of learning of K goes on within the shop. Is that sort of your experience when you picked it up? Were you working closely with other people to pick it up?
That was not my experience, because like I actually, like, because I was moving across the country to get to New York, I actually took some time and like learn K. So I didn't know it when I was interviewing, but by the time I got there, I knew enough. And then we also at 1010 we have, it's a database product, and it has a query language that is kind of an XML language. For the first few years that I was there, we had an intern program, and we hired a bunch of people. We went to, John Ernest and I went out to Stony Brook, and we gave a college around here, university around here, and we would go talk to the people, and we told them about K and just as a recruiting tool. And a lot of other people like that was me doing one thing, but other people did like massive amounts of effort to recruit people. And we found like the best and brightest interns we could find, and every year we did like a course in K. So we had like a first week with just lots of different people from the company would give presentations about K and give them homework, and never had a problem with it. We never had a problem like with people not learning K. Or with not, people liked it. I mean, it's a nice language. After that week of training, they were productive enough to build things that went into our system. So, over the course of the summer. And so I think it's not an obstacle to find K developers, or to find people that are willing to be K developers and try it out. I think some of our best hires have been people who like the Python Paradox, were people who are already interested in K. Like I mentioned John Ernest. So he started about this. He actually, Joel Kaplan also mentioned him. He said you should talk to him, and I think you should too. But he and I started right around the same time. Both responded to that ad. And he had actually, he's written a JavaScript interpreter for K called OK.js. So like he was like ultra into K at the time, and also one of the best programmers I ever met. So a lot of our best hires have been people who are just really interested in K for whatever reason. So I think just that enthusiasm. If someone came to, one of the guys I hired, I was talking to him on the phone one day when we were interviewing, and he had asked me about something, and I mentioned somehow the topic of that IRC channel came up, and he's like, "Oh, I've talked to you. I know who Tangentstorm is on IRC, and you helped me with some question." and just because of that, like I consider that a very good sign that he was, somebody who was interested enough in languages to seek us out because of K. So I've had that argument with people, with managers that have been hired since we got acquired. Joel retired, and the culture's changed a little bit. And I remember talking to a new manager who's like, we can't hire K developers. It's not possible. And I said, you haven't tried, because if you try, you will find that you can find some amazing developers that either know this and are enthusiastic about it, or see it and want to learn more. But I posted on LinkedIn when I was hiring. This is not a job that's available now, but I posted a job advertisement to my LinkedIn group, and it was called "Want to Work with K at 1010 Data," and there's at the very top there's a little screenshot of the Mandelbrot set rendered in like ASCII, and then next to it is the K code that I used to generate that. And I don't know. Somebody told me that was the best job. Somebody at the bottom said something like it was the best job advertisement they'd ever seen. But we actually wound up not hiring anybody for this role. But we got interested in it. Like it's not hard to find people who have an interest in interesting languages.
Do you find that people who might have a more traditional background, like you were talking about, you came from Python, is that an obstacle to learning one of the array languages, or do you find that you really just look for interest in the array language first?
To be clear, I don't think interest in the array language is a requirement. People who are different recruiters do different things. The guy that ran our intern program, he's no longer with the company, but the candidates that he brought were somehow way better than the people that we would often, many of the people that we would often get through the traditional, recruiting tools that had been in the industry for many years and had all this stuff on the resume and looked great on paper. But it's always hard to judge talent in a 30-minute interview or an hour interview. So you give them we do the leak coding thing, or we give them some kind of puzzle, and try and grill them and see how they do. But for me, it's all about like, do they have the ability to take an idea? It's not even like, I guess there's two parts of it, right? You got the problem solving part, figuring out what to do when you're solving an interview question or whatever. And then can you take that idea and express it to a computer? Like, so the last video I did that Connor mentioned earlier about dealing cards, there's a part in it where I talk about an interview question I give, which is just give me every permutation of an array, right? And of like the numbers 1 through X, right? So if you say, give me all the permutations of 1, 2, 3, first you say, do you know what a permutation is? Let's make sure you know the right words. Then, okay, now let's now do it by hand. Show me that you understand this concept. And let's say, okay, so they write out 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, or 1, 3, 2, and all that. And so, okay, yeah, we agree that those are the permutations of this. There's 6 of them. Now, how do you get a computer to do that? And what I found is that some people who have been programming forever, just like, no matter how many hints you give them, they just never get there. They cannot write this program. And other people, the people that I always test interviews, like I went to John Ernest, and I went to like some of the brighter people that I saw in the company, and that like were like junior developers that I thought were good. And I said, can you do this? And they passed the test. So I said, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And some people just sit there and they don't know what recursion is. They don't know what, I don't know. And some people struggle for a bit and then they figure it out. And usually, it's not something you just know how to do. You shouldn't memorize the stuff, but if you can figure it out in 10, 15 minutes, or I know that you're getting there, then that's the person I want to hire. I don't care what your resume says. And I don't even care if you can figure it out. I'm saying if we can talk through the solution, because you're not solving puzzles most of the time. Sometimes you are, but mostly it's like, okay, we're agreeing on doing something. Can you take what we've agreed to do and actually express it in code? And if you can do that, then I don't think it matters what language you give the person or whatever. It's just, if they can express it to a computer and get the computer to understand it, they can learn any language. That's my philosophy.
Do you find K is a language that once you have somebody who thinks that way, who solves problems, works their way through problems, who can work with somebody else to work their way through problems, do you find that K is a language that makes that easier? I
think it certainly gives you the tools to do that. Well, it's kind of like like J, even more so. You have so many more primitives. K is a much smaller subset. K is like a tradition, to me, is like a very just a traditional scripting language with a lot of shortcuts and nice syntax for doing like common thing. It's compressed. K is like a compressed traditional language, in my point. or at least you can treat it that way. And I think a lot of people, I guess what I'm saying is like K definitely feels to me like you can use it as a traditional language. If you are used to Python or JavaScript or anything like that, you can write code that is similar to what you're used to, right? I don't think that's the case in J, but but K feels like a traditional language, just a little more compressed. And then if you want to, as you get used to it, you can start seeing, oh, I can do this even faster, and I can do this little trick, and I can pick up the idioms, and I can start using some of the array concepts, I guess, the vector concepts to do that. And we have wildly differing styles of code in our code base. We tend to have like one or two people owning a particular thing, and if you look at different parts of the code, they look different. It's a web platform, right? So there's a whole database component, and then that's a massive thing that's all about distributed computation. We've got a thing about like managing the users and all the things that you've uploaded and where your data is and what's it called and who has permission to it and all that stuff, and that's a different thing. And then like the stuff I work on is all like I work on the user interface stuff. So like we have this on top of our language, we have this ability to build components and to draw them on the screen and compose. You can it's like a rad tool. You can compose little widgets, and you can say, I want to drop down here, and it's bound to the database. So you can say, I want to drop down that has everything from this query, or I have a bar chart, or so whatever it is. It's all based on queries against your data. I work on that system that helps you build applications on top of our system. And so externally, that's like you're doing this XML code. But what I do is I provide chunks of little JavaScript and K that talk to the system, and it's it's a lot of string manipulation and building up things, and it's not cryptic. In fact, on that job listing, I show the really cryptic, what I would consider cryptic if I were looking at it from as a newbie code for the Mandelbrot set. But then you scroll down, it's like, well, it says something about like don't worry, not all of our code looks like this, because we don't have 1,500 Arthur Whitneys that are or even 100 Arthur Whitneys. We have, you look at Stephen Apter's code, and it's very clear and mathematical, and it's one line at a time. But like he's an outlier. Most of our code does not look. And I'm not saying like I consider Stephen's code extremely well crafted. But he's doing like specific, like he's writing a parser, and he's writing that one thing, and it's a module that fits into the system. But other parts of the system are just much closer to traditional work, because that's the nature of what's being done. We're sticking strings together and making HTML things, and we're reading a form, and we're dealing with dictionaries.
So, Michael, you've done a lot here to demystify K, to show that it's not a cult. You don't need to belong to a race of
We do pray to Arthur every Thursday. So.
Well, I was about to say you don't need to belong to a race of semi-divine beings in order to use it. It's enough to be curious with a K and to get in and learn how to write good application code in K. So the question that leads me to is, would you go back? Can you imagine leaving doing development in K to go work in, I don't know, Java, C++?
Yeah, I don't think I'm married to it. Like, even now, I'm not like a pure K developer. So I'd say I do about 25% K. Yeah, it's probably evenly distributed at this point. Because I in addition to the GUI, I also work on our API. So that same technology for building applications you can use to build like dynamic endpoints that like feed your query as a certain kind of JSON object. So to write clients for the API, I do a lot of work in Python to like provide demos for people. And we also I do a lot of testing. I write test code in Python. So about 25% Python, which is new. That used to be very rare, but I started doing a lot of Python. And then I'm writing a lot of HTML and JavaScript for the UI components. And then I spend a lot of time writing code in our macro language. So it doesn't have a name. We just call it 1010 macro language. But it's in a lot of ways when you query our system, you can write SQL, but you can also maybe I should back up. When our system was designed so that you would upload data, and you would have a web interface. You'd see your table, and you would pick from a menu. I want to sort this table. I want to select this table. I want to tabulate on this column, and you give me a summary or whatever I want to do. And you did it all through the GUI. So there was no language, there was no typing, there was no query language. It was just select things and now save this collection of stuff. And so somewhere along the line, we created a notation for an XML notation for just storing all the work that we did. It had previously just been stored as like K objects, so that your query was just a K object that was a list of steps you did to make this thing happen. And then the what we call macro code grew out of that. And so now we have, it eventually became like the like internal, like the actual representation is now this XML thing. So, but it's a series of steps, and they're all in a way very similar to the K primitives. I think Joel said in his interview, if he didn't say it there, he said it to me numerous times, that he couldn't have built this company without K, right? Like it was, the K primitives map very closely to operations you do on a database, select and transpose and things you would want to do to columns. And even the grade operators, why there's no sort in K, there's a grade operation in K. So you have a column that says, you get the grade of that column, and what that gives you is the indices that tell you what order. I know Marshall can give me the actual definition, because I stumble over it, but it tells you it gives you an array that tells you what order it tells you the order these things should be in, what order to put these things in, and then you can apply that to all the columns.
Yeah, how you would reorder them in order to sort them.
Yeah, and so like that's the thing that you can apply to one. You inspect one column, and now you can apply it to all your columns, all the vectors. So we, as a user of the system, you don't see that internal vector, but there's one operation called sort or whatever, and you tell you what you want it to sort by. And so unlike or in addition to the normal SQL operations that you can do, so we have a SQL operation, a SQL parser that parses SQL and turns it into these operations, but you can also just write them directly. And so then you can tell it step by step what you want it to do in your own macro codes, things that you would have done by following along in the system. And then on top of that, we started saying, well, okay, now let's add if then and loops and conditionals and things like that. So you can generate this macro code using an extra, there's like another subset of languages called, we call it block code, which is these blocks of things that give you procedures for generating procedures and conditionals and loops and variables for generating the query that you eventually want to query. And then on top of that, we added this user interface stuff. So there's a tag called widget now, or dynamic, and then inside of that you have widgets, and so you lay out a user interface that can then call all these can dynamically generate queries for you. Or I don't think any of our customers have ever done this, but if they wanted to, they could write logic in K3, or they could write logic in Python. Now that's something we're adding to we've just started adding to the system, Python and R. But I do a lot of work in macro, and I would say it's unfortunate that I can't it's a proprietary system, but I would say, I would say macro code is one of the nicer languages that I've ever used in my life, because it does all that data binding for you. And so you can whip up a user interface and just, we call them quick apps. You can just a couple lines of code, and now you have an application that queries and gives you interaction on your data. And so, I would say the combination of macro code and K, and then I still like Python and I like web stuff. So I like doing all those things. And I like the variety of it. I mean, if somebody doubled my salary, sure, I'd go do COBOL if you want. I don't know, to answer your question about if I would go back.
No, that answers it. You have to be paid a lot to leave it.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I'm very happy where I'm at.
But we've also learned that you can learn K and work with it for years, and you don't wind up in the forest baying at the full moon.
One of the very first questions I asked, because I had seen K, I asked Adam, Adam, our chief scientist, I asked him, are you guys functional? Like can you read each other's code? I mean, can you really do this at scale? And part of the answer to that is that, I think Eric Iverson said this too, was that like a J team is like one person, a K team is usually one person. You can manage a pretty big chunk of the system with just one person, because you have so little code to do. And so part of it is ownership, but But I've looked at many other K developers' code, and it's not intimidating. Occasionally there are people who use the primitives differently than I do. I'd say, like, again, we have different styles. Like, Stephen Apter, like, knows how to use every single primitive, and, like, his code is sometimes intimidating to look at, but then when you look at it, it's like, oh, this makes perfect sense. I would be more than happy to maintain some of his code going on. For the most part, like, we don't find ourselves, like, going in and, like, dealing with, I'm not gonna say there's no bad code. Like, it's not that there's, for the most part, like, it's not a pain to, like, pick up someone else's K code. I think the troubles that we had and is that like, sometimes when you've got a piece of the system that has been handed from person to person to person to person, you get, like, and this happens anywhere, like any language, you get, like, code that is way too long, like, a function that has grown to 36 pages when you print it out. This is not not fiction.
In K code, that can't be possible.
Yeah, and I mean, it's this complicated system. And this is I would think not specific to any particular language. This is a function of organizations writing code, right? You get to a point where once a piece of code gets bigger than, like, a screen full, you can't, people use their screen as, like, working memory. Like, your visual field is part of your working memory. You can't keep it all in your head. And so the more that you can keep on the screen, the more working memory you have. And so as soon as it scrolls off the screen, that's more that has to go back in your head to keep track of everything. Unless you have tools to, like, compress it and, give you whatever. So, or there's some logic to it that you can understand, like, this part is isolated. But, like, I'm always scared that, like, can I even introduce a variable that might have been, declared, way up here somewhere? I don't know, because I can't see it all on the screen. I think Joel said this was that one of the benefit. I know Arthur. The reason Arthur doesn't put any white space in is because he wants to see everything, and that is a tremendous benefit of these languages, and that runs into a conflict with the natural tendency of an organization to sometimes, when you're handing things back and forth, to sometimes just technical debt. Like, you always have technical debt, and this is one particular thing where I think it can get out of hand, and you lose that benefit of K when you let that happen. Of course, the answer is to factor things into smaller pieces. And I'm not blaming anyone. Like, my own code has done this. Like, if I have a particular thing, sometimes the logic, there's more clauses in the if else or whatever, and you got to stop and refactor sometimes. Sometimes that doesn't get done. So I picked up Racket recently, and specifically to write a K3 parser and to try and make a refactoring tool for that problem. And it's only, like, in one or two places in the code, but, like, rather than do it by hand, I just wanted to make a tool. So didn't get very far. I made a parser and an editor, and it highlights the code, and then it parses our code base. But I didn't get to the refactoring part yet. Maybe
in the future. I would be remiss if before we ended this conversation, I didn't ask a little bit more about, we mentioned it at the beginning and a couple times throughout your YouTube channel, but also I don't think we've mentioned since the beginning that you stream sort of live coding sessions on Twitch. So on top of sort of plugging those and maybe giving a pitch for if people are interested, what they can expect both out of your YouTube channel and your Twitch stream. Feel free to comment on that. And then also if you want to plug other stuff, your Twitters, or if you're other places, because it sounds like, a part of your career story has been taking the role of a teacher and just sort of as part of your jobs, but also just as, you spend time on different forums answering questions. So where can people find you and what can they expect on your different sort of platforms?
I'm on Twitter for now, at least. As long as it's still in business, I'm on Twitter. As Tangentstorm, I'm GitHub has a bunch of stuff. You can find me on I haven't streamed on YouTube and Twitch as Tangentstorm, and also on YouTube I started a second channel called Tangentstorm, where I'm putting some. I had a daughter, 15. My second daughter was born 15 months ago. So about that time, I was streaming every day because I was getting up ridiculously early in the morning, hence the ridiculously early J morning show, and just watching her for a while. I'd been taking the night shift previously, and then we got to the point where she was sleeping in the morning, and so I had for about a month I was streaming every single day or every weekday, just working on a tool for. It was called JPrez, the tool for that I'm using to record interactions with the J REPL, record and play it back in the video. So I didn't want to I hate typing live in a video while I'm trying to talk because I make so many typos and it's just a waste of people's time. I'd much rather have it go smoothly in the video and have be able to synchronize the cadence of each little keystroke and stuff. Because you can pause in the middle of it while you're doing it. So I filmed I think 23 episodes, or I published 23 episodes of me working on this program, a fairly large J program, and just talking about what I'm doing and explaining things as I go along. So that's probably the bulk of my videos. But I also try to do like presentations that I've scripted and edited and polished a little bit. And in fact, probably the biggest headache I had when I was streaming was I hate just uploading a live stream every day and not being able to edit it. The editing just became crazy. So I decided to split the channels. And I haven't done a lot of live streaming because I was in a tiny house with a baby that stopped sleeping at 7 o'clock in the morning, and she was screaming. We were in a tiny 2-bedroom apartment, and we finally moved out to a house and thought I was going to have some time to start doing streaming again. And then it's a fixer-upper, so we have contractors here all the time. But sometime in the near future, when things settle down a little bit, I hope to get back to streaming. I don't know, it probably won't be early in the morning, but at some point in the day, I plan to do some regular streaming. I got to find a project to work on, and then periodically, I have a bunch of talks planned for I made this tool to make videos, and I made the dealing cards in J video, which is all about permutations, and I made a little short video about just a YouTube short about some idiom that I saw on the J wiki that I didn't recognize, and it turned out that it's now a primitive, and that's why I didn't recognize. But but I made those videos with this tool that I made, and so there's more stuff I want to do, and you keep working on it. So I guess that's it. Yeah, come watch me on YouTube if you feel like listening to me ramble. And
But I don't understand the thing. If you had a baby that was screaming early in the morning, how did you stream and not have background noise?
Oh no, I mean she was sorry, I meant sleeping early in the morning.
Oh,
so she was
scream all night, and then you're up, and then you might as well record. Okay.
Yeah, she was taking her nap right around that time in the morning, and I had gotten used to getting up that early in the morning anyway. So I started taking the morning shift while everyone else in the house was asleep, and then but then towards the end of it, she started waking up earlier and earlier, and just I couldn't find a quiet time to record anything.
She found out you were doing J, and she couldn't sleep. She couldn't nap. Too exciting,
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll put links to all of those YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, GitHub, all that stuff. So if folks want to go follow you, and whenever the construction ends and the things settle down more, whether that's in the near term future or the intermediate to long term future, people can check out the videos and live streams there. And I'll guess thank you for coming on. And I think there's a bunch of, this will be interesting for the listeners. I think that I have to go read that Python paradox paper, which it's paradoxical that Python is the language chosen because it's now the number one most popular language in the world. But at the time, I would much more have expected a language like Haskell, which I've heard the exact same argument at Haskell meetups that, it's not actually, people think that there's a problem in finding Haskell developers, but if you really put yourself out there, there are a ton of people looking for Haskell work, but programming in some other language because they think that there are no Haskell jobs. So really there's these two sets of people that are perfect for each other. And if you just go put the company out there, and they're looking for Haskell, you do that self-selection thing, that there are people that are very passionate about that technology. So not only are they people that know Haskell, but they're people that, really, really know Haskell and would, even trade, a certain amount of, whatever Google's paying them to code in golden language X to be able to develop in that. And I'll have to go read that paper. Interesting. Very funny that at the time it was written, they chose Python, because now it's gone on to become the exact opposite of what that paper is pitching.
He mentions a couple other languages there. One of them is J at the bottom of that paper. He mentions J and puts it in the same category.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's just and they had a thing called CP free, computer programming for everybody. It wasn't just luck, right? It was a little bit of this is palatable and looks clean and what. But they've made an effort to do this, and I haven't watched the episode. Oh, so you guys did on popularizing the array languages a couple episodes, or listened to it. But I'm eager to listen to that, because I think that I don't think it's out. I don't think it's crazy to think that J and APL could be far more popular than they are. I mean, I have like 5 books on my shelf that were like mass market books that people wrote that are all about statistics in APL, algebra and APL. This was at one time a market leader in the world of programming. I mean, it could be again.
Yeah, it's a very, I love we'll add this to the show notes as well, but there's a video by Richard Feldman called, I think we've mentioned it before on this podcast, Why Isn't Functional Programming the Norm? And it's a talk about what makes a programming language popular and how come there's no sort of functional languages on average across the different programming language rankings, that there are, 10 different ones. Typically it's, procedural or imperative languages like, Java, C++, Python, etc. And the talk talks about, what is it that makes a language become super popular? And anyways, for those that haven't seen it, I'll leave that as a exercise if you want to go watch it. But yeah, those kinds of discussions, because it's I think it's a lot less. It's like not black and white. What actually makes a language quote unquote successful, and also defining what success is. It's not just necessarily always the number of people using the language, but. Anyways, yeah, thank you for coming on. I think the listeners are definitely going to enjoy this, and who knows, maybe in the future, if there's ever a K posting that 1010 Data is looking for, we can come back and retrospectively add it to the show notes in case if 2 years from now, it's 2022 right now, but for all we know, there's someone in 2024 or something when there's a new posting, and check the show notes, because there might be a new posting in the future that has yet to come up yet. But yeah, once again, thanks for coming on. And with that, we will say happy array programming.
Happy array programming.